past 10 years, the Ryan Aeronautical Company has been engaged in the research and development of vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. This effort reached the flight test stage in 1955 upon completion of the X-13 airplanes built as VTOL research airplanes for the U.S. Air Force. The flight test program for these airplanes was divided into 4 phases, each aimed at developing and proving out the specific portion of the complete VTOL mission. The first phase centered around the X-13 as a conventional aircraft. With tricycle landing gear installed, the airplane was rigorously tested in horizontal flight, proving the practicability of the basic design in this flight regime. The next stage was the investigation of vertical flight and low-altitude hovering. To accomplish this in an expeditious manner, the airplane was supported vertically in a tubular framework equipped with 4 castered wheels. The pilot's seat was installed to rotate forward 45 degrees, providing improved comfort and visibility in this attitude. After only a few flights, the pilot was able to demonstrate excellent control and maneuverability. This series of coordinated maneuvers amply demonstrates these capabilities. A number of hovering flights were conducted to develop the technique of approaching a cable and making simulated hook-ons. Even on the first attempt, the pilot had no difficulty in performing this maneuver. The next phase involved flights to investigate transitions from horizontal to vertical altitude and return. The first complete transition was accomplished on November 28, 1956. During the latter part of this phase, several flights were made to develop the techniques to be used in let-down and approach to the ground service trailer. Shown here is a complete operation of this type. The airplane makes a conventional takeoff from the runway of Edwards Air Force Base, climbs to the altitude at which transition will be initiated, and accomplishes the transition from horizontal to vertical flight. The pilot flies the airplane to the area of the ground service trailer in a descending turn and maneuvers in close proximity to the trailer, simulating the actual landing maneuver which will be accomplished in the final phase of the program. The 12 to 15 knot wind has no adverse effect on the operation. The high degree of stability and precise control shown has been characteristic throughout all phases of VTOL operation. After completing the simulated landing maneuver, the airplane backs away from the trailer, turns, makes a smooth, low-altitude transition back to horizontal flight, lands in the conventional manner. In the final configuration, the airplane is shown on the ground service trailer prior to demonstrating the first complete VTOL mission on April 11, 1957. The engine is started and the trailer raised to the vertical. After brief checks of the control system in tethered flight with the hook still locked, the pilot unlatches the hook, applies power, and takes off. The airplane backs away. Turns and makes a smooth transition to horizontal flight at low altitude. Flies by at high speed a few seconds later and returns to initiate the transition to vertical flight. The ease with which the transition to and from horizontal is accomplished graphically demonstrates the efficient performance of the control system. Once vertical, the airplane makes a gentle descending turn in the landing pattern previously established and approaches the ground service trailer. Although a landing signal officer is used on this first hook-on flight, subsequent landings have been made without any help from the signal officer. Adequate visibility is available to permit the pilot to judge his position with respect to the cable by using a pole mounted on the trailer as a reference. The airplane contacts the cable. Sweep arm is actuated automatically, and the airplane is hooked on. The airplane is lowered to the horizontal, and the mission is completed. Pete. Nice to see you. Sit down. I'd like to ask you a few questions. Well, Pete, now that you've made the first jet VTOL flight, what do you think of the airplane?
Well, to be perfectly frank with you, I was quite pleased to find how straightforward the whole operation was. As you probably noticed, the airplane has very fine stability and control. This gives it a very high degree of maneuverability, making the actual hook on and hook off quite easy to perform. Perhaps the most exacting portion of the flight was the entry transition from conventional to vertical flight. However, this was very little more difficult than the conventional landing in a modern jet fighter.
How do you feel about safety in making a takeoff and landing at zero speed as compared to the fast takeoff and landing of conventional aircraft?
Well, actually, I feel that there are certain advantages from a safety standpoint. The vertical approach is considerably slower. This gives the pilot more time to perceive deviations from his desired flight path and to make corrections. Also, the kinetic energy to be dissipated in the event of an emergency during a vertical landing is considerably less, being only a fraction of that in the case of a conventional high-speed landing. Now, the time spent in a vertical takeoff, during which engine failure would be critical, is a little bit less than a similar situation in a conventional airplane. The time spent in the approach and landing is about the same in both cases. Thus, the critical period of possible engine failure is actually less in the case of VTOL airplanes.
Pete, how do you feel about the pilot's environment and controlling the airplane in this vertical attitude?
Well, at first it would appear that the pilot is sitting in an unnatural attitude. However, after spending a bit of time in this position, one becomes rather accustomed to it and feels right at home and can perform his task with no difficulty at all. The control senses in this airplane are quite natural, and I feel that the transition to this type of flying will be rather straightforward, somewhat similar to the transition to a helicopter. The fact is, this airplane flies quite a bit like a helicopter in the vertical attitude.
Completion of the flight test program at Edwards Air Force Base has added another successful chapter to the story of man's conquest of the air. In order to demonstrate the capabilities of the X-13 to groups of high-level military and civilian personnel, the Vertijet was moved to Washington, D.C. for operations at Andrews Air Force Base and from the Pentagon building. Now, on this morning of July 30th, 1957, we are a part of a group assembled before the river entrance to the Pentagon to witness a complete vertical takeoff and landing flight demonstration of the X-13. To emphasize the importance of this event, Lieutenant General Donald L. Putt, Deputy Chief of Staff for Development, Headquarters, United States Air Force, steps to the microphone and says,
"This is an unusual and memorable occasion. Exactly 48 years ago today, the first military airplane was accepted by the Aeronautical Division of the Office of the Chief Signal Officer, United States Army. Today we commemorate that historical flight. The Ryan X-13 Vertijet, which we are about to witness in flight, is the world's first fixed-wing turbojet aircraft capable of rising from its vertical tail-sitter position, convert to normal horizontal flight, and then return to a vertical position for landing. The performance of the X-13 is so remarkable that to some, seeing is not quite believing. But I believe we are witnessing a trend of things to come. A control system had to be developed to stabilize and control the aircraft while hovering and flying at low speed before the normal aerodynamic controls became effective. While the X-13 is not a combat aircraft, I am sure the advantages inherent in a combat airplane that would combine the vertical performance of the helicopter and the horizontal flight performance of the conventional jet aircraft are quite obvious to all.
In addition to the aerodynamic controls found in all conventional jet aircraft, the X-13 is equipped with a jet reaction control system. This method was necessitated by the obvious lack of normal airflow over the aerodynamic control surfaces at extremely low speeds. The principle behind jet reaction control is basically quite simple. Necessary control forces are developed by jet engine exhaust deflection and thrust, or throttle variations. The efficiency of this system is demonstrated by the facility with which the X-13 automatically maintains the vertical attitude. Precision of control is graphically displayed as the pilot easily executes the maneuvers required to take off and land over the hazards of underbrush, water, trees, and building installations. Jet reaction control and the nose hook takeoff and landing techniques, both developed by Ryan engineers, are the keys to successful jet VTOL flight. Use of the nose hook eliminates the need for landing gear and associated doors, actuators, and accessory equipment. Converting this weight saving to additional power results in an increase of from 20 to 35% in total thrust at takeoff. General Putt emphasizes some of the operational advantages of the jet VTOL aircraft.
The elimination of the need for large areas for airfields and long runways, the capability for easy dispersal and greatly increased mobility are just a few of the advantages to be gained. Though there are still many unsolved problems, we have established the feasibility of jet VTOL aircraft, and operational planners may now include this capability in their plans for manned aircraft of the future.